Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy. Guys, today I've got with me Spencer Dent, who is the founder of Clozd. Spencer, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sun is shining. I cannot complain. And I'm excited to talk about this topic that we have today because like you and I talked about offline, there is so much for folks to get from what you're going to lay out here for us today. We're going to be talking about the value in understanding not only why you lose, but understanding why you win and how to sort of apply a program or a system to that. But Spencer, before we get into all of that, I would love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Clozd have been up to these days.
Yeah, awesome. So Clozd, we run win-loss programs for some of the brands and best companies in the world. Some of our clients include Salesforce.com, Marketo, Tableau, a lot of B2B organizations that you may actually be using in your organization work with us to figure out why they win or lose deals. We have tripled in size in the last 2 years, have grown quite significantly. And we work with a lot of really great companies to help them figure this out through a variety of tools that we can talk about.
I'm excited to get into it. It's not the type of tool that I've had a conversation with yet on this show. And that's one of my favorite things is giving my listeners the scoop, the inside edition. And it's something that applies to, we were talking about it, since you and I were talking about it in terms of, the value when it comes to sales teams and sales productivity. But in life, it's important to figure out why you're losing and why you're winning. And God, if I had a system for that, if I had exit or win-loss interviews for folks I've had interactions with, it'd be very valuable.
Sure.
But in the context of B2B, just frame it up for us. Give us an overview in what it means to have a win-loss program and what the value is in that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the most interesting parts about win-loss is everybody thinks they're kind of doing it, but nobody actually does it systematically. So if you go look at most companies, they have loss reason reportings built into their CRM. Those loss reason reportings are actually set up pretty crappy. It's not intuitive. It doesn't make sense. Or it's cumbersome. Hey, every time you close out a deal, Nikki, here's the essay homework assignment you have to fill out. They get poor compliance, poor engagement from sales teams. And most importantly, typically the people that build those don't actually start with the end in mind of actually figuring out what do I want to look at and what do I want to see systematically over and over and over. Mm-hmm. Couple that problem with, at the end of the day, the sales team doesn't often know why they win and lose. There's a study done by a company called Pragmatic Marketing that the result was they found that 60% of the time the sales reps were wrong as to why they won and lost a deal. And the way that broke down was about half of that 60%, 28%, the sales rep, it was a total airball, had totally missed. The other 32%, they were at least partially wrong. And we find that the way companies try to track and understand this is they try to do it through a Salesforce dropdown or something else. And the way it's done often ends up leading to no real great output, which leads to fire drills, which leads to lots of anecdotes, which leads to other things instead of just systematically understanding from your rep and from interviews or surveys to your buyers as to why you win and lose. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot in there, but the real value happens, to get to the real question, what's the value? If you understand why you win and lose, you can ramp reps faster. You can improve your messaging from a marketing standpoint. You can really enhance and accelerate your product roadmap to focus on the things that actually are driving wins and losses. You can figure out what are the features or things that I'm missing that my competitors have that I need to go do right now to win the next deal. And there's no bigger way to really move the needle from a feedback or customer experience standpoint in a B2B setting than actually just figuring out why people are choosing to go with you or stay with you, and why they are choosing to not go with you or leave you, and then go address those things immediately.
Right. Yeah. And it's not something like you mentioned, anytime we're talking about closing the feedback loop, I do think a lot of people understand why that would be necessary. But I do think that, like you said, the way that folks are going about it, there's not a third party doing it, and it's really going to be difficult to get the kind of, genuine, objective buyer feedback that's going to really close that loop. I had an experience when my very first sales job. I worked at a car dealership in a small town. They were ripping people off. I won't name them, but anyway. So I didn't do well on the sales floor because I understood why people weren't buying from us. But when I would talk to leadership about that, they didn't want to face that back. It was like you talked about, where it's like, oh, she's just being whiny. So the job they reassigned me to was to call folks who had come onto the car lot and didn't buy a car and ask them why they didn't buy a car. And I was excited about that opportunity because I understood even then that there was going to be some value in closing that buyer feedback loop and understanding why, folks didn't buy with us. But the fact that I wasn't the third party, especially depending on the experience they'd already had at the dealership, I still wasn't able to get what I was looking for. So talk a little bit about what you see in terms of the value of it being a third party, particularly when it comes to closing the feedback loop with the buyer.
Yeah, for sure. So there's two real benefits to engaging a third party. The first benefit is the buyer will be much more likely to participate and much more candid in that conversation. So I'll give you an example of that. One of our clients, regional vice president of the European EMEA region for this company, a huge software company, they lost a multi-million-dollar deal, big deal, right? They went out and tried to, and he went out personally and talked with the buyer. Subsequently, 2 weeks later, they sent us out to go talk to the buyer. And this regional vice president was completely blown away at the extra level of detail the person shared with us about their experience, about the sales process, about the gaps in the product, about the challenges the company had across the board. So they'll just be more candid. It's the classic case, like a good analogy is I break up with my girlfriend in junior high school. It's really awkward for me to go talk with her about why that happened versus, of course, you'd send your friend and she'll tell your friend everything. Similar situation. You get more candor. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is this. Oftentimes, companies make the mistake of trying to do this all internally. So they send somebody from product or somebody from product marketing or somebody from sales to go out and interview buyers. The issue is that feedback is immediately viewed with hostility by people because it's viewed as bias. Of course, the product team is going to come back and say the sales process is falling down. Right. Of course, the sales team is going to come back and say our product or solution sucks. Whereas when you have a third party, it makes it easier to ingest the data as being independent and unbiased. So it helps on both sides. You get better feedback and it makes it easier for your organization to ingest it and do something about it.
It's story time, and this growth story is about search engine marketing. Okay, so the story revolves around eSub, a project management SaaS company specifically for subcontractors. Even though eSub had incredible customer retention, they struggled with growth. Being a niche service, they discovered that there was little demand expressed for their solutions within search engines. To take on this challenge, eSub hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. After refining targeting, pre-qualifying clicks with an ad copy, and developing custom landing pages, Directive was able to increase eSub's marketing qualified leads by 71% while decreasing their cost per lead by 65%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
So another thing I'm wondering here, right? Because we've been talking mostly just now about understanding why folks lose. When we think about understanding why folks win, first of all, why is it that you think that folks don't focus as much on that? And I'd love to hear a couple of, if they exist, maybe with respect to B2B tech buyers, a couple of common things that made them say yes. Did you discover anything there that was surprising in your experience?
Yeah, for sure. So we do a lot of these programs, and oftentimes you're right. People are really interested in why did we lose? We want to focus on why we lost. And there's tons of value in figuring that out, because if you can move the needle there, that's great. If you can understand why you win too and what's repeatedly happening when you win, then you can go focus and double and triple down on that and extend that strength. And so often people worry about what's not happening instead of worrying about what's going right. It's like the example I gave you earlier when we were speaking. What's your winning recipe, and how do you go replicate it over and over and over? We find that companies that figure that out are the ones that grow the fastest. So I'll give you a couple of good examples. One of our clients, they're in the software space, and they have this feature about their product that when they sell and when the buyer views that, when we interview the buyer, when the buyer views that as a key component and a key enabler of what they're trying to accomplish, game over, they win every time, right? When that's not conveyed to the buyer, or when that requirement doesn't seem as important to the buyer, they lose. And it's that one thing, and figuring out that one thing, and figuring out how do you message that one thing consistently over and over, because it really is this software company's core differentiator against the half a dozen other competitors in this space. And so learning that has been huge for them, because that's where they extend their lead and win. So and we have tons of examples of that when we work with our clients, where what they think they're good at, they may or may not actually be good at in the mind of the buyer. And so we've had times where we're doing interviews where the core competency of that company, let's say, for example, it's a company that helps you with your marketing lead scoring, right? But then the buyers are saying, hey, their lead score, it took them 2 months to call me back. That didn't make any sense to me if they're a lead scoring company. So you can find really interesting feedback that can help you figure out where you're strong and where you're not. And good win-loss will do two things. It will confirm, like if you're a good manager, and if you have a decent set of strategic kind of muscles in your mind, you'll be able to know what matters and what doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But so win-loss, oftentimes what we do is we confirm what's happening or what you believe is happening. We'll also typically uncover things that you weren't aware of. But in that confirmation, what we actually help you do is help you weight it. So yeah, I knew that we had a problem in our sales process in the way we qualified buyers. And I knew we had a problem in the way that we demoed or showed our products. And I knew that there was some confusion about our pricing across our buyers. But what I actually found out after we went and interviewed 30 customers is that 15 of the 20 losses that we interviewed complained about our pricing model, and that it was unclear, that it felt like a used car salesman, that I wasn't sure why they were asking me what they were asking me. It made no sense how they arrived at the price, or why it would change, or when it would change, whatever. So you knew those three things were a problem, but actually you figured out which one you got to go solve right now.
Right. Yep. No, perfect. I'm so glad that you laid all this out. Like I said, it's not something that I get to cover on the show a lot, but it's one of those things that it kind of seems like a no-brainer that it's something that you want to pay attention to. And you did a really good job of laying that out for us. So now, Spencer, that I've successfully picked your brain and seen what I could get out of it, it is time for you to tell us what you are putting in it. So talk about a learning resource that you've engaged with that, informing your approach, or that's just got you excited these days.
That's a good question. One of the things that we do at Clozd, actually, as a company, we're a small company, low double-digit number of employees here. And so it's a really tight-knit group. One of the things that we actually do as a company is we read together. Like we do like a book club, and every once a month we'll go and actually like debate the principles that we read about at a lunch. So I'm actually leaving right after this to go to that. One of the books that we just read was Out for Blood in Silicon Valley about the Theranos situation. That was that's a really interesting book. If anybody has read it or is interested in it, that whole saga of what happened with that company. And there's a fine balance that startups and companies play between, painting a vision and, marching towards a future that can exist and blatantly lying, right? And so we talked a lot about that as a company. How do you make sure that you're clearly communicating and outlining a future that's possible? And how do you avoid, especially in the selling process, we see this happen a lot with our clients where sales reps can get really aggressive about what they promise. And that can become a big problem on the back end for our clients. So making sure that you are, always kind of North Star and true and full of integrity is a huge principle here. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why our clients like our services is we will tell them what the buyer said, no matter what the buyer said. So if the buyer is brutal, here's the recording, right, of our conversation with that buyer so that you can understand really what they said. So yeah, we focus a lot on that. And so we try to consume a lot of content here to keep ourselves smart and sharp.
I like that. I can tell. You're certainly sharp. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing that with us. Out for Blood, I'll have to take a look at it. And I'm sure that everyone out there listening, just like me, has become a fast fan of you, Spencer, and they're going to want to know how to keep in touch. Let us know how to connect with you.
Yeah, so our website is clozd.com, CLOZD.com. Obviously, you can check anything out there. If you actually wanted to reach out to me personally, always happy to chat with people that are interested in this space. My email is just Spencer, SPENCER, @clozd.com. Always happy to chat. We attend a lot of product marketing, sales enablement, sales type events, so you may see us there. We also will be launching in the Salesforce App Exchange later this year an app that is native to Salesforce that can help you collect internal feedback from your reps. So look for that if you're interested in understanding that as well. But happy to always share more about what we do and the interview programs we run and et cetera, et cetera. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Spencer.
All right. Have a good one.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.